Are loved by all.
Yes.
Yes.
Or be a complete embarrassment. Like another example is that I brought up in the context of the total media Soviet-era blackout on the John Edwards having an affair on his cancer-stricken wife. I mean, for months there, I had to get my news from the National Enquirer. So
the only paper that covered it. At the same time, the New York Times was running a front-page story about a supposed affairs of McCain that apparently was totally bogus.
Right, which they finally apologized
but they
for.
spiked Edwards.
Right. Right, but I had to get my news from the Enquirer, so I think I'm the real victim here. And finally it comes out, it's true, but all this time, and I have a memo from the one of the editors at the LA Times instructing his bloggers, so apparently there was some interest in this, that the bloggers should not mention the John Edwards story.
Yes.
And the Washington Post, an editor there said, well, because he had dropped out, I don't know, a month or two earlier, well, he's not running for public office, so I don't think you're going to see wall-to-wall coverage. Well, is that the standard now if you're not running for office? Because I don't think Rush Limbaugh was running for anything when the drug story broke, and most preposterously, elevation of someone, I mean, Rush at least is the most important conservative in America. Okay, but how about Ted Haggart, an evangelical minister I'd never heard of, who suddenly becomes the Pope of the Protestants? And by the way, we don't have a Pope. We have a lot. In fact, we don't even need a minister, but we do go to them because it's fun. I know a lot of ministers in America. I give speeches at mega churches all the time. I've heard of a lot of them. I'd never heard of this guy. I'm sure he's very big in his little area. That's another one CNN's doing a big profile, I guess, on.
He wasn't running for president, was he?
He was not running for office, and he wasn't even a prominent conservative. Here you have John Edwards, who was the Democratic Party's last candidate for vice president, a very likely possibility for, you know, attorney general, some cabinet position. Total media blackout. The only way you knew that he was caught in a totally embarrassing sex scandal was that suddenly he was just whitewashed out of the news. If somebody brought him up, they'd cut to a commercial break.
It's unbelievable.
Yes.
It's unbelievable. Now, you're a lawyer by training, and I'm wondering what you think Barack Obama's impact will be on the Supreme Court.
Judging by the rest of his domestic policy, he'll probably try to pack the court. I think it'll be a disaster. We don't have any indication yet. We don't have any resignations yet. But I mean, he has tried to continue the policy, which I so love, of George Bush and the war on terror. Ha ha ha, liberals.
Well, keeping Defense Secretary Gates was very interesting.
Yeah, and he's not shutting down Guantanamo. Right. We're not pulling out of Iraq any sooner than Bush would have. He is doing some stupid things based on political correctness, like moving the focus of the war from Iraq, where we were winning, to Afghanistan, where we will probably lose. I mean, that is the stupidest thing imaginable, and he did that purely out of politically correct reasons, because the crazy left-wing base demanded that the Democrats say we'll pull out of Iraq, we'll pull out of Iraq. But we do need to engage them someplace, as George Bush and many people kept saying, rather than on the streets of New York. We want, you know, the terrorist flypaper someplace over there. And by moving it from Iraq to Afghanistan, he could be creating the next Vietnam. I probably shouldn't say that. I hope it doesn't turn out that way. But Peter the Great had trouble in Afghanistan. The Russians lost in Afghanistan. That is not a good front for us. We should have left it in Iraq. Why did he do that? Because he had to please the Democratic crazies.
He seemed to shift fairly quickly on the defense issues, and I sort of wondered if the first couple of mornings of the briefing just scared the bejesus out of him, you know? Because people, we don't know how bad it probably is. But those are the real figures and the truth about who's where and what they're doing.
That's what Cheney said. And I don't know if it was, because I do have some Democrat friends.
I'm sure you do.
And during the campaign, you know, I kept going to them saying, are you crazy? You're going to vote for this guy? He's going to pull troops out of Iraq, shut down Guantanamo. And they'd all just say to me, he's not going to do that. So normal, serious Democrats just assumed, oh, he's just doing that for our crazy base. And by the way, I can think of no circumstance in which a Republican president would say something simply to please the base that he didn't really mean. There may be some things he didn't get to. There may be some things he'd double-cross us on. And then he'll lose, like George Bush raising taxes, or, you know, Reagan didn't get around to abolishing the Department of Education. And I don't know, given the choice between the Department of Education and Soviet Union, I'll admit it's close.
But I think he did the right thing.
Yes.
Now, you started your career as a lawyer. You graduated from the University of Michigan Law School. You did the law review there. You worked for Senate Judiciary Committee. You practiced law. You litigated for the Center for Individual Rights. And yet I've heard you, when you go before smart young people, you say, don't go to law school. Why not? And what should smart young people be doing?
There are too many lawyers. I mean, as a practical matter, it's not a particularly good way to make a living. I mean, it's based on billable hours, unless you're going to be a scumbag trial lawyer and make America a much worse place and take a 1/3 recovery from these sleazy personal injury lawsuits.
Like John Edwards?
Yeah, right. Channeling babies before the jury, unless you're going to do something like that, or go corporate counsel, or be a prosecutor and you don't make that much money. There are too many lawyers, and it's a very hard way to make a living. You're working weekends, you're working late at night. So, I mean, one thing I do say to them is, if you really think you want to do tedious work and make Xeroxes 20 hours a day, if this is your life's ambition and you love the footnotes. Actually, I kind of like the footnotes.
I know you
like
do.
The practice
You've
of
got
law.
a lot of them in here. They're great.
Law school is fun. Law review is fun. Working for a judge is fun. Being many forms of government lawyer, Senate Judiciary Committee, prosecutor, Department of Justice, a lot of those can be fun. They don't pay well. If you really want to practice law, then okay, fine, go to law school. But what I find with a lot of students is, I mean, nobody knows what he wants to do when he's graduating from college. And I asked all of my most successful friends in their 30s a few years ago, did you know this is what you were going to be doing when you graduated from college? And all of them say, I had no idea this job even existed. So I think a lot of college kids don't know what they want to do. They think law school is a way of expanding their options without contracting them. No. Once you're on that treadmill, you will get sucked in. And notice that the practicing lawyers, whenever they get a chance to leap off that treadmill, they take it.
It's true. It's true. But what do you tell smart young people, young conservatives, especially young conservative women? Where do we need them most once they finish college?
Well, if they're conservatives, I tell them to go into the media, to become teachers or college professors, to go to Hollywood. If they're liberals, I tell them to go to law school.
Now, you do a number of college lectures around the country.
Yes.
You do it for Claire Booth Luce, you do it for Young America's Foundation. You do
Lots of fun.
Wonderful job. Now, when Hillary Clinton was running for Senate and she would go around and do college appearances, she would have restricted audiences, and often the left would control the questions. Do colleges ever let you restrict the audience and have restricted questions?
No, and that is really crazy. The reason that's crazy is, I mean, I believe at some point George Bush they did have to have some restrictions on the audience. Well, why is that? It's because liberals show up and start screaming their heads off. That's what the problem is. Crazy liberals disrupting things. You do not have college Republicans disrupting speeches by Michael Moore. I promise you. But you do have liberals, and by the way, I write about this in my last book, If Democrats Had Any Brains, They'd Be Republicans. The first chapter, I describe the college lecture circuit. And one interesting fact about it is at Harvard, at the good schools, at basically any Ivy League school and the equivalent, they're not standing up screaming. They're not throwing food. They're smart enough. They want to challenge you in question and answer period. And I'll take questions until they've collapsed of exhaustion. In the southern schools, they are far too chivalrous and bright, I might add, the best region of the country, the South. Never happens at the southern school. It tends to be the Bush League schools out in the middle of America, where obviously there are some smart students. They're all in college Republicans. But you also have some students who probably should not be at college. Per Charles Murray, too many people are going to college. And they're ginned up by lunatics like Bill Ayers, college professor, Ward Churchill, college professor. You know, I think 82% of the membership of the Weather Underground is now teaching on a college campus. Okay, those people are just animals. And so if anything, a conservative speaker on a college campus would have a reason for restricting the audience. We don't, but I don't even know why a liberal would need to restrict the audience. Well, in Hillary's case, she probably needed to restrict, as I was saying about possible assassination threats. They'd come from the left, and Hillary was getting crazy protests from Code Pink.
Yeah. Now, you're a graduate of Cornell.